for that in Health and Human Services. So because Black women represent 12% of the federal workforce, again, their livelihoods and lives have been disrupted. And of course, given the targeted attacks on the dismantling, the degrading, and the funding of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, we have also seen the unlawful firing and the push out of Black women in the workforce. And I just want to do some level setting here. DEIA, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is very important that we name that. Diversity means everyone. That's right. So that means women, that means Black folks, that means brown folks, that means the LGBTQ community, that means veterans, that means rural communities. So diversity means everyone. Equity is just about fairness and opportunity. And inclusion is supposed to mean that if we truly live in a meritocracy, inclusion in the American dream. And of course, accessibility is that all of those things that I named are accessible to all. So what should be controversial about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? But again, the contours of these policies, and it's so important to note that because the harm that Black women are disparately experiencing is not some naturally occurring act. It is not an act of God or nature. It is an act of of a godless man operating under a majority. I mean, I continue to be so confused by this. We're all adults. We understand that elections have consequences, but why you would choose to use a majority to exact and enact harm for policy negligence and violence is beyond me. Now, what also brings us here is, of course, Black women have been the canaries in the coal mine. And that's true across all issues. My lashes are too long, but especially, but it's not too long just for these glasses. Because we're the canaries in the coal mine, right? So please come in, Councilman. Unemployment is the highest it's been in 4 years. But there's a disparate impact on Black men and women with staggering numbers for Black women. When we first started to focus on this, it was when the job numbers came down in August. And it had 320,000 Black women having been unlawfully fired or pushed out of the labor force. And unemployment overall was at 4.3%. For Black women, it was at 6.9%. And that number has now gone up a full point. Now, it's important to note that this administration continues to obscure data. In fact, at one point, the Trump administration fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because they did not like the story that the numbers were telling. And now, they are delaying information coming out, so they continue to play games with the numbers. But we know anecdotally that when the rest of the country catches a cold, Black folks catch pneumonia. And the reason why everyone needs to care about this is because of the residual impact on the GDP and on our economy. When the lives of Black women, Black families, and Black futures, that's what my campaign is called, have been disrupted, that affects everyone. That means that the dollars that we normally stored in our faith houses, that we invest in philanthropy, that we support nonprofit, that we circulate in our communities, all of that is disrupted. In fact, economists estimate that 2% of Black women being fired this year has led to $37 billion being lost in the GDP. So when people say, why the focus on Black women? Is it just because you're a Black woman who's on Financial Services Committee? Why should we all care about this? Well, you should care because Black women are at the intersection because of gender and race, so we bear the brunt of every policy the most. However, because we're at that intersection, that means the harm that is coming for us is coming for everyone. And that's why you need to care about it, because it stands to disrupt the entire economy, and again, Black women, Black families, and Black futures. And the final point that I would make is that Black women, nearly 70% of us are the primary breadwinners in our family. So again, this is devastating. And one economist friend of mine likened it to, because I've reached out to Chair Powell, Jerome Powell from the Fed, demanding that the Fed do its job. They have a statutory mandate of full employment. And so I'm like, this is a 5-alarm fire. This is a crisis now. This is what we were saying in August when it was 320,000 Black women that we were aware of being pushed out. And again, overall unemployment at 4.3, Black women were at 6.9%. And I said, this harm is coming for everyone. The Fed has a statutory mandate of maximum employment. We need you to do your job. We need you to study the data. And we need you to come up with a plan. Now, one economist likens this to, if white women were being pushed out of the labor force at the rate that Black women are, okay, because the job market for Black women is 5 times less than it is for white women. So if the job markets were equal, you're talking about 3 million white women that would currently be unemployed. Right. And that is the equivalent of the labor workforce of women in Pennsylvania. So I want to just share it with you and think of it physically. That is a lot of people. So if this were the same pace for a white woman, you're talking about 3 million women that would be impacted. And if that were happening, the country would be paying attention. And so that is exactly why we're calling on the Fed to do their job. So that's really what brings us here. And I just thank the YW. I thank you for your partnership. I thank you for the work that you do every day. It's wonderful. I'm so grateful for your leadership and Brianna for helping us to pull this meeting together, working with Sophia Abdi from my office. Let's clap for them because everything they do is with intention, and because of the work that you do year-round to reduce and eliminate barriers, to champion the need for affordable, accessible, quality childcare, to support Black women in their mental health, in their workforce development. See, I'm a fan for real, so I know what you do. Technical skills, all of those things. We thank you for the work that you do year-round. We're grateful for your partnership today. We thank you for your giving us a space for us to convene today. Again, we're here to center the voices of Black women, the leaders, the advocates of those who have been directly impacted by job loss due to this hostile administration's DEI rollbacks, funding cuts, and workforce pushouts in their sectors. This is about their lived experiences, their expertise, and their resilience. They're at the heart of this conversation, and we are here to listen, to learn, and to act. We know that rising unemployment, rollbacks of DEI commitments, and cuts to funding perpetuated by the occupant of the Oval Office are not abstract issues. They are real challenges that Black women are navigating and face every single day. And we know that solutions, when we come together across sectors to share insights, strategies, and a collective commitment to economic and workplace equity, that is when they are at their best. I always want to be proximate. That's why I say the people closest to the pain should be closer to the power, driving and informing the policy making. That is not just a t-shirt, though I do sell it. That is an ethos and a practice, because when we are more proximate, we understand the intersectionality, the nuance, the complexities, but it's also where we harness the best solutions legislatively and otherwise. So I'm honored to be here with all of you. I have a bold, honest, and actionable conversation that centers those most impacted and moves us closer to real change. All right? All right, let's clap for the room. I do have some guided questions, but it's really.
No, I just want to thank you, Congresswoman Pressley, for being here, and for everybody who made it. We were able to bring so many folks into this room, and I also want to recognize the folks who weren't able to be here today, but are still very much impacted and are still very much impacted. And so this is for all of us. Congresswoman Pressley talks about us being canaries in the coal mine, and I can't think of a better analogy. So for all the canaries in this room and in this country right now, we are doing this for you.
That's right. That's right. Yes. That's right. And I do believe sunlight is the best disinfectant. And so we are going to shine a light today. And I would love to just hear from Black women who have been directly impacted by the disruption in your livelihoods and lives. Would anyone like to speak to just what happened and how this has affected your life? And then just if you'll say your name and however you would like to affiliate yourself for the purposes of the media and everyone here.
So my name is April Brown. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, and I was formerly the director of Racial Environmental Justice Committee. And I think how this hit me personally was when the nonprofit that I ran was told that our grants were going to be terminated the end of the year. And then the kind of breakneck pace of the abilities to try and pivot, the restructuring of this very small grassroots organization, and the way that we just weren't able to do it. When we were looking at, initially it was only going to be 100,000. Then it was 250,000. Then it was $400,000 that was taken out of our budget. And that was 60% of our budget. The majority of our nonprofit were BIPOC folks. And so in the summer, I had to lay off 2 of the founding members. And that was, it still feels right. And then because I made the most money in the organization, it made sense for me to go. And, I still don't know how the organization will survive, but for us, the work that we did working with, municipal politicians and helping bring knowledge to environmental justice is work that needs to happen in Providence and in Rhode Island in particular. And it was like a stab in the heart, to be quite frank.
Thank you for sharing that. And I have to say, for whether you're talking about federal workers or people in the private sector, every person that I've met and every Black woman I've met certainly has been more concerned about the unfinished work than they have even about the disruption and the uncertainty in their own life. But who will do this work? It is so essential. How will it advance? And, who will be harmed? Because that work is going unfinished. So I thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for sharing. Very similar sentiment. So I was recently laid off earlier this year. I was in the role of Director of Health Equity for a major health system here in Massachusetts, and was overseeing health equity strategy for 6 different community hospitals. And I emphasize community, given that those hospitals tend to be under-resourced and really need the most support. So was laid off, and my role was very much so, how do we prioritize the livelihood from a holistic sense, thinking about social determinants of health, where people live, where people play, where people work, and incorporating that into clinical outcomes, very much clinical outcomes that impact our community. So looking at NTSV C-section rates. So what C-sections are happening technically unnecessarily was one of our major priorities. So removing a Black woman from being in these hospitals that oftentimes when we're in Massachusetts, the pushback that we were getting was, well, we only serve maybe 9 Black mothers a year, but what about those 9 Black mothers? How is their care? Access is one thing, but what is the care that they are receiving? And that was a major part of my role. So similar to what you were saying, my heart really goes out to the disabled population, the Black population. My background is from the island. So really thinking about and being a representation and a voice for the Haitian population, the Dominican. So I see it as very much of a gap that is no longer there because of the result of being laid off. And I really think about, as a public health person, and I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Teresa. I was just so excited to answer the question. My name is Teresa Alphonse. I'm an implementation scientist. So I look at how we implement programs from beginning to end, and then also how we evaluate them so that they're efficacious and they're also building in equity and make sure that they serve everyone. And I'm getting a Doctor of Public Health at Emory University. So putting my public health hat on, I'm really thinking about the public health implications of all of this and seeing this as very much a public health crisis. So we know when there is financial instability that comes along with stress, which leads to things like hypertension, which leads to mental health concerns, anxiety. So this all manifests as well, like physically as well. So I know we talk a lot about the economics, but putting that hat on, I want to make sure that we address the physical ailments that go along with what we're talking about here today.
I thank you for naming that, and that is important. I represent a district, the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District, that already has some of the most disparate health outcomes, and we lost 2 hospitals. I do have the most community health centers of any congressional district in the country. 1 in 3 of my constituents receive their care from a CHC. But of course, the funding solvency of our hospitals, nursing homes, community health centers are all being threatened because of the changes, how many cuts to Medicaid.
Right.
So it is important to name that cumulative toll and impact. I thank you for naming that. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? And I'm also curious, what resources have you found to support you in navigating this? So, what did you do?
Yeah, and I know we had this conversation in your office. So I've very much pivoted, and that hasn't been a conservative, what's the word I'm looking for? Like concerted effort, yes, but one that I've had to navigate myself.
Hi, my name is Helen Joseph. I am a licensed mental health counselor and a mental health equity educator. Your question of what did you do in the aftermath is one that I'm here as a professional, but also as somebody with lived experience being impacted by the attack on DEI. My loss of employment and being pushed out of the workforce happened in 2020. When these organizations and corporations made commitments to our community to stand beside us and to honor the expertise, the lived experience, and the needs for our well-being and safety. As a trauma therapist whose work focuses on how do we address the trauma of systemic violence, of systemic oppression, to have 5 years of lived experience of what happens in the aftermath of having the full force and weight of these systems come up against us is one that has definitely informed and strengthened my ability to serve our communities. And to see this increasingly over the last few years, and as the second administration has very quickly accelerated and amplified its impact on Black women and on many of our communities as a first generation Haitian American, immigrant communities, queer communities, right? All of the intersections of Black womanhood. The ways that the trauma is being created in our communities is incredibly distressing for many folks. And because of the stigmas and the lack of the stigmas that exist against mental health in our communities, the lack of culturally responsive providers that exist, the attacks on our healthcare system, the gap is being widened. This trauma is being created, and how do we address it? What resources exist? What conversations are being had? And much like Teresa shared, what my lens and perspective is, in the midst of this happening, what are we doing to address not just the initial place of impact, but also the ways that it reverberates throughout our communities? And we know that, this will impact us. Everything that we're seeing right now, what we're feeling and experiencing, will impact us for generations to come. Mm-hmm. And I know that even as a trauma therapist, even as somebody whose work focuses on addressing the trauma of systemic violence, it took a lot for me to address for myself. What do I do when I know that I exist in the context of a structure and a system that has focused in on my identities as a threat, when really I should be viewed as an asset to the ability of our country, of our communities, and of our families to really thrive. And so really I come to this conversation to share my personal experience and to advocate for how we're having these conversations around the many different ways that these major issues are impacting our communities on many different levels, including in the areas that our communities sometimes are a little bit more reluctant or hesitant to engage in just based on historical exclusion from mental health care and access.
Definitely a multi-layered, multi-pronged assault.
Yeah.
And it is assault, in every way. It is anti-Blackness on steroids, codified in policy. So thank you for that articulation. I wish more people were fearful of a dictator than they are diversity, equity.
Right, yeah. Right.
And as my 17-year-old daughter would say, the switch up has been crazy. I know people doing anti-racism work. There has been such a pullback,
Right.
A rollback on those commitments, unfortunately. So thank you for that. What about folks in the, my colleagues in government, in the policy making space? What perspective would you like to lend to this in terms of efforts to mitigate these harms? What you're seeing and feeling and experiencing?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Congresswoman Pressley, thank you for the invitation to be part of this conversation. I'm Lauren Jones, Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development with the Healy Driscoll administration. I often think about our workforce with a people-centric approach. So the fact that we can begin today's conversation hearing directly from impacted workers is humbling, but also helpful. We have experienced so many headwinds and realities this year that has disrupted how people look for work, how people are impacted. And certainly, Congresswoman Pressley, you emphasized the impact on Black women nationally, but also what we're seeing here in Massachusetts. On the state level, we are able to look at the BLS data that the Congresswoman has referred to. Our data is at a level where it's not as, on a monthly basis, you can look at national data with statistical evidence on what you can see for state level data. We can't filter it month by month in the same way as we look at it over the year. And when we look back on August data, the latest available, we can see the numbers are real. We've seen an increase from, I think it was 3.1% to 5.5%, just over 12 months, demonstrating the impact that you've seen nationally, but what we're also seeing here in Massachusetts. And I think for Massachusetts, it lends itself to the realities of also our economy. Massachusetts has a strong eds and meds economy. When we think about who's behind that workforce, that is highly populated by Black women. When we think about the impact on our immigrant workforce, so many of our Black community includes foreign-born workers that make up our communities, but also our workforce. And certainly, I don't have to underscore the distractions and the unfortunate impact our immigrants are seeing every single day nationally and in Massachusetts because of federal policies. And so we're grounding ourselves in policy. We're grounding ourselves in hearing from workers. But I think we're also trying in Massachusetts to remind ourselves that we're in a Commonwealth that leads based on our values. We have strong leadership in many women that are around the table. We have Congresswoman Pressley, but we also have Governor Healy at the helm, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, Attorney General Campbell, that are fighting for making sure that we can. And Mayor Wu, since we are in Boston, and I'm a Boston resident as well, and we are represented by the mayor here too. But recognizing that we have an opportunity to lean in to our values and not shy away from them. And I don't think that anyone around this table sees that we will be shying away. And I will say in any remarks that I have, where I speak about the importance of our workforce agenda in Massachusetts, I lean into the fact that we know our diversity, our importance in equity and inclusion matters. And it's actually not really a question on how we build, or attract or retain our talent, because we know that we will be a stronger Commonwealth if we are more intentional with lifting up the diversity of our communities, the diversity of our Commonwealth, and ensuring that that is reflected in any of our industries. So we are very focused on sector-based strategies. I'll dive more into that through the conversation, but I appreciate that there's a space to be able to talk candidly with impacted workers, but also talk as a whole and how we can make sure we can move forward here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Madam Secretary, I'm grateful, and it is always our hope that courage is contagious. We don't take that for granted, that you are continuing to practice our values through policy at a time when others, and when they feel the heat, are capitulating and shrinking in this moment. So we do want to acknowledge that. Is there anything else that you might offer in terms of, or maybe it's a non-issue since we are still practicing our values as evidenced and not rolling back our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility policies, but anything else on the workforce stability or economic equity standpoint that you want to make clear in terms of our resilience as a Commonwealth in our labor market that you want to make sure folks are aware of?
Absolutely. I think I often talk about the tools in our toolbox, and that's really where I feel like I can have influence, making sure that workers as well as employers who are looking for talent can access resources. So in Massachusetts, we go big on registered apprenticeship as an example. When you think about registered apprenticeship, it's earn and learn. It provides a more even playing field for people that may not have the degree or the expertise coming into a role to gain that and learn on the job while also earning good wages. And I bring that up as an example because we know there are some industries that are underrepresented by women, by people of color. And we also know that they are industries that are so key to Massachusetts. And we're using registered apprenticeship to do exactly that. Construction. We have to be proactive in thinking about how to build a more diverse talent pool of workers within construction. We want to see more cranes in the air. We want to make sure that we have talent ready to do so. We also know that we have an aging construction workforce, and what better way to bring in fresh talent than by leveraging registered apprenticeship. And there are amazing programs like Building Pathways here in Boston that are providing opportunities for women and people of color that are going through registered apprenticeship programs to do exactly that. We've taken that kind of model to then open up to not just in the building trades, but life sciences, thinking about how our life science companies can lean into this exact model that trains a carpenter or electrician to then be a lab technician. And that's why we want to make sure that we can continue to see the clinical trials and investments that we know make Massachusetts a global leader, because it also opens up opportunities there as well.
Of course, we see a defunding of research, unfortunately. So Massachusetts has really been impacted by that.
And that goes back to our strength being eds and meds and the impact. And so how can we make sure that we are coming together? And Governor Healy has proposed a drive agenda before the legislature right now to put in $400 million in state funding that we hope can be complemented by philanthropic dollars and private dollars to scale ways that we know are greatly impacted by the pullback in NIH funding, because we want to make sure that there's still investments to support life-saving solutions that we know impact residents right here, but people around the world come to Massachusetts for that kind of care as well.
I would say it's important to note that Black women are often underemployed because, one of the reasons why we dominate the federal workforce is because all things being equal and, there being those guardrails around discrimination that we experience in the private sector. Yep. So that's basically saying, the government is saying who is the most qualified for this position, and Black women overwhelmingly were the most qualified, the most credentialed, had the expertise, all of those things. So everyone is missing out when we're pushed out of the workforce. We are the most educated, and we also carry the most debt, which is why I work so hard on student debt cancellation. And of course, now a lot of those strides are being rolled back while the administration is working actively to privatize those loans. But that's a conversation for another day. But I do want to name those things because it's all connected, right? Childcare, workforce development, apprentice opportunities, student loan debt. unemployment, underemployment, and that is something that I worry about now, that you'll have all these women with specific expertise and specialization that we're being deprived of. And if they are able to be gainfully employed, they will likely be woefully underemployed. And what will we do about that? Any other thoughts in that space in terms of what we can do to mitigate this harm, strategies and programs to support Black women's employment and economic mobility?
I'm going to just put a idea out because I know that my friends from the city of Boston had also looked this up. I think investing in childcare, you brought it up as a key infrastructure. That is something that I know is a whole of government approach in Massachusetts, but I know that Mayor Wu has also been leading in this as well on the local level. That provides infrastructure not only for more Black women as well as all workers who enter the labor market to have that infrastructure and support. But we also know that as we look to build the talent pipeline of early childhood educators, we need to do right by increasing living wages for these educators that are really helping to support
immigrant
and Black work. Exactly.
Women, right.
Yes. And so I share that as a prompt in case the city wanted to speak to that. I know that you guys have been working hard on that as well. But I also, welcome others that chime in.
Anything y'all want to add in terms of mitigating and these harms, reversing these trends, or more broader systemic policies that support Black women generally?
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Nelson. I serve as the Senior Advisor for Racial Justice for the City of Boston. Certainly want to thank Congresswoman Pressley and Abba for bringing us here to this table. And thank you, Madam Secretary, as always. The City of Boston is here to listen today. We are here to try to understand what we can do to try to build upon all that people are sharing. I want to also thank the three of you for sharing. I tend to get emotional, so we're not going to do that today, but I was very moved by your very candid, story and testimony of where you are. And to some extent, that's why Dana leads the work on women's advancement for the city, but that's why we're at the table, because we want to understand what is happening and then how we can continue to build upon policies, begin to try to continue to advocate from a city level on how we move this agenda forward. I will say that as of the work that we're doing now, what we have heard, and I will talk about this real quick, is to some extent what you all have shared. There's this need to figure out not only how to deal with persons and Black women and women of color who now feel invisible and or erased or not seen or valued, particularly in city and all across the board. But then how do we begin to meet people where they are in those spaces and make sure that they are lifted, they are heard, and then infusing that into policies and practices that continue to advocate for such. So that's why we're here today. I will say in the role of racial justice, we really push policy. We really try to push ways to include those who are historically underserved, those who historically have been marginalized, and those who historically their voices have been muted. And so our goal today is to hear, to listen, to learn, and to help build with an action plan. Abba and I have often spoken about what's the action plan, but how do we collectively move forward so that everyone is a part of how we get out of this space, recognizing what is happening across the nation, but that we continue to lead and strive as we always have. So I want to thank you all for sharing, and I will share more later, particularly around mental health and well-being as a woman of color, as a Black woman in leadership. But thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you all for inviting us here. One of the things we also are seeing within the Office of Women's Advancement, we have WeBoss. It's a network of women entrepreneurs that we have sort of reinvigorated in the last year. And to your point, Congresswoman, we have seen a lot of Black women that, in addition to their regular job, are now picking up more of the small business and leaning into that side hustle to account for the gaps in employment and things like that. So we are absolutely here trying to figure out how as the city we can best sort of intervene. We've also seen a lot of our partners, our community partners, talk about the loss of grants, the loss of funding. And we've been trying to put together roundtables so folks can sit and do the work together and figure out how to do more sort of grant applications together and how to combine our forces. Because we are actively thinking, how can we put give a little bit of relief?
I love
to share about the small business perspective when we have a chance.
Can I just add one more thing? I'm so sorry, I'll be quiet. Okay. I just want to say thank you, Dana, for lifting that. So part of the work is partnership development and partnership collaboration. And one of the partners, she could not be in the room today, but I think you all know the woman who is the leader of the Museum of African American History, Dr. Noelle Trent. And part of how we started getting into this space was based on the fact that her funding was stripped, as some of you all know, in the amount of $500,000 that happened earlier this year. Congresswoman was at the head of leading that effort to ensure that not only the museum is heard, but our narratives, right, our history as a city of Boston is also uplifted. So I just wanted to mention that, and as it relates to partnership and how we are looking at how to support partners, how to ensure that we look at creative ways to make sure that people's doors don't close, right, to make sure that people are getting the basic necessities that they need to strive. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. I like when I said doctor, like 8 black
Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Benelfi Ramos. I'm the Chief of Policy at the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, or BECMA for short. And if you don't know about BECMA, our mission is to drive economic equity and prosperity throughout the Commonwealth. And we do so to ensure that Black businesses and Black communities can thrive. Now, that's a long way to say we're trying to close the racial wealth gap. And you're like, why are we mentioning the racial wealth gap when today we're here to talk about Black women's unemployment? Folks can't build wealth if they don't even have income to begin with. So I think that's an important place for us to start. I'm a policy nerd, so I have my notes. So I will be looking at my phone. Congresswoman Pressley, thank you so much for holding this. And thank you to the YW Boston. You know, if we think about Black women being the breadwinners or often higher earners in their families and in their communities, right now, the cost of rent is too high. People paying their mortgage, utilities, incredibly high. The cost of childcare, high. We know what's happening with healthcare and thinking about what's the impending issues related to the big ugly bill and what's happening with Medicaid and mass health moving forward, which is going to impact us all, because if people who are on mass health cannot seek care other than the emergency room, that is going to be devastating to all of us. Now, circling back to rent, because I'm going to end on business ownership. Half of Boston households who are renting are cost burdened, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And the Boston Foundation, I'll shout them out, Boston Indicators, they put out their Greater Boston Housing Report Card for 2025 for last week. And if we're looking at Black renters, 56% of Black renters are cost burdened at any level. 32% are severely cost burdened, meaning that over 50% of their income is going towards housing. So that's not counting all the other things that I mentioned. We know that Massachusetts is short a bunch of housing units, and Black women, as usual, continue to be creative. They're going to start businesses. Many of you already talked about having businesses. Now, when Black women have businesses, you know, are also some of the most educated people in the country, just have to throw that out there. Their Black business owners are often 10 to 12 times more wealthy than their peers, but they make up such a small amount of businesses and such a small amount of businesses that hire employees. And that's a big deal, because when Black people have businesses, they hire from their communities and they're able to take care of their communities in that way. Connecting to what was said earlier about the eds and meds, when the eds and meds aren't getting funding from the government, when research dollars aren't available, they aren't hiring Black women businesses. They're not hiring Black businesses to come in and take on a contract. And contracting is a way that Black business owners can build wealth. So there's a direct connection there. We've had businesses reach out to us. Oh, my project was canceled. My contract was canceled because the folks who have the money are no longer funding this type of work. So that's just a big thing I wanted to make sure that I mention. And also we know that there's...
We do want to continue to push our partners, well, all of us, you know, on the federal, state, and municipal level to be more intentional in making people aware of those contracting opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll close really quickly. I agree completely that even when Black people and Black women have businesses, there is a gap in the capital that we're able to access. And that continues to be the case, and that gap is getting wider, the racial wealth gap, but also the capital gap. So starting a business might be a solution. And right now, if we think about tariffs, supply chain challenges, if we're thinking about inflation, if we're thinking about anti-DEI affecting contracting, but also affecting the people who visit these businesses, there are ICE raids and things going on that are having a broader impact outside of what many may think. It's devastating for Massachusetts GDP moving forward, and our economy is going to shrink, and hopefully not. So I think of this very holistically, and I think about all the different ways that Black women are affected. There's many women, Black women in my personal life, friends, colleagues, people from high school, college, grad school that I know that are now unemployed and trying to figure it out every day. So I'm really appreciative to be at this table, like representing them and hopefully bringing them into the room as well as we have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Keep that for one moment, because if we could also just transition and speak to solutions. So when we're talking about capital, access to capital issues, and we know that venture capitalists only, I think, invest 2%. VCs invest in Black-owned businesses, and then when we've tried to develop targeted efforts like the Fearless Fund, as an example, those efforts have been targeted. So in this moment, as we think about how to combat and weather this storm and to mitigate the impacts of it, I mean, we talked about those broader policies like investments in child care, addressing student debt, cost of housing, all of those things. But are there other things that you would offer, like microloans, for example?
Yes.
What would be helpful as philanthropy, which is struggling in of itself? But listen, the closest analog that we have to this moment, in my estimation, is the pandemic. We were together on the Beckham stage earlier. I said it to you, it's wholesale harm.
Yes.
The only difference is that we knew anecdotally what communities would feel that harm the most, and that bore out. But this is different because this harm is discriminate. We knew who would bear the brunt the most, but the harm was not as precise. It was not as discriminate as this harm. But the thing about that pandemic is that we did pivot, we did innovate, and we started to take care of people and one another and develop new systems and ways of being that did emerge from that crisis. So I'm also wondering if we can push in this moment, and there are new norms that we can establish.
I really appreciate what you shared in our previous conversations as well as right now. Microloans are definitely something that are needed. I think about if our GDP is affected, the Massachusetts state budget is in the $60 billion. And so if we think about Massachusetts budget, if it's not growing, if it's staying the same, and we know that there's going to be competing priorities, the money that's already allocated to support small business technical assistance or small and micro businesses in general, how do we ensure that that money is actually going towards Black businesses? I think when we're distributing a lot of resources, oftentimes it's not being tracked who is actually the recipient of these resources in real time. Yes, we need data. We need transparency. There are some bills in front of the legislature. I'd be happy to follow up exactly what they are. They're on our policy and legislative agenda that look to say we want to ensure that there's data and transparency, and we want to ensure that a percentage is going to these minority and women business enterprises here in the state. So it's not about even more money at this time. That might be a challenge. I'd love more money, but if it's still going to be the same amount, how do we ensure that it's going to Black women businesses? I'll also say if there's any type of relief related to the tariffs and supply chain challenges for the Black-owned businesses, that would be wonderful. And I think there's short-term and longer-term solutions. So Congresswoman Pressley, I know you've talked about baby bonds at length, student debt relief. We think about match savings programs. We think about first-time home buyer dollars, things related to eviction prevention and relief. That can go a long way right now as folks are across the spectrum being challenged, but in different ways. So how are we ensuring we're reaching folks at different income levels, at different levels of wealth as folks are really struggling right now? Last thing, anecdotally, I was on my phone, on social media, as I sometimes am when I'm not steeped in this, and I saw an article on the local news that was saying that unemployment claims, that Massachusetts we're not the best, we're not doing it the fastest to pay out unemployment claims. And I think that is something that can make a big difference because folks are without income. So if we're able as a state and as a region to ensure that that funding is going out, folks have to wait less time, they could try to stabilize themselves in the meantime. And I think that would go a long way. And thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, she has been.
Thank you.
No, thank you. You basically said everything I was going to say, so I appreciate you. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Gifty Opoku-Adjman. I guess I'm an award-winning economist. I'm also a PhD candidate. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. PhD candidate at Harvard Kennedy School studying public policy and economics with a focus on race, gender, the economy, and then also the author of The Double Tax, which is actually about how we are all overcharged and underpaid. So a lot of the things I've brought up in this table really describe what the double tax is, right? This compounded cost of racism and sexism. And thank you so much, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, for just being an amazing supporter. You've just been so incredible, and for bringing us all together. And thank you so much, Abba, for also congregating us here. Here's what I'll say. I'm going to go ahead and lay back for a second. This economic crisis is manufactured. Okay. I want to make that really clear. I think I was talking to someone on Slate. They said, how do we stop jobs from being lost? And I was like, well, stop firing people. Right? It's just like very simple. You know what I'm saying? We need them in the government, right? And so I think that it's important to root ourselves in the facts, which is that, this economic crisis is manufactured. They're gutting industries that women, especially Black women, are disproportionately represented in. I know that there's been like a list circulating of jobs that are no longer seen as professional. And I find it really just hilarious in the most derogatory way, right? That, nursing's there. I don't know if y'all know what nurses do. I have two parents who are nurses. That's not an easy job. And the entire healthcare system is really resting on the labor of nurses, right? And so, when we talk about solutions, I think that we need to change our frame of mind as policymakers. And this is something that Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is very familiar with, this idea of Black woman best. So it's been put forth by Janelle Jones, who served as the first Black woman chief economist of the Department of Labor. And basically what she says is the following. If the economy is working for Black women, then it's working for everyone else, right? And I can make it really practical. I think, when I'm talking to folks who are not of the melanated variety, right? What I like to tell people is that, I think a lot of people will see Black women as minorities that we don't need to know a lot about, because what can they really tell us about the economy? What can they really tell us about our country? But as you noted, Congresswoman Pressley, Black women are sort of at the center of the Venn diagram that is our society, right? We're breadwinners. Right? We are business owners, as we were just talking about. We're parents. We're highly educated. We're philanthropic. We're also low, middle income, working class. I just covered pretty much the entire country in that explanation, right? And so there's a lot to learn about from us. I was digging through the data, alongside, Secretary Lauren Jones as well. And I was thinking about, where exactly did things go wrong this year? And if you actually look at sort of the Fred, which is kind of like, I forgot what it stands for, but basically like BLS data that is showing sort of unemployment, you can see the precise month that Black women start to splinter. And it's right after the March jobs report around April. So you see that everybody's kind of like this, and then Black women go like this, right? Showing that we've increased in the unemployment rate. And so when we talk about Black women best and how it sort of addresses the double tax, which shows up in every aspect of our lives, as many of you have just demonstrated, Black women best says, look, if this policy is not uplifting the most vulnerable Black woman, it's not doing what it needs to do. Right? And I think a lot of times we can use that in a lot of different areas. Childcare, for example, right? I think nothing radicalized me more than learning more about the childcare costs and burden that that Black women and women in general deal with. I remember telling my sister, oh, why don't you just get a nanny? And that's exactly what she did, right? She laughed at me like I was crazy. She said, I'm the youngest, right? The little sister, she was like, I know you're not talking to me. But I think when you look at the numbers, right, childcare is a second mortgage. So if you're already starting off with less, so is student loans, right? So if you're already starting off with less, you're paying out more to loans, you're paying out more to childcare, and then no one's really talking about another element of this, which is because Black women, 69% of Black mothers are the breadwinners of their household. I think what people are not understanding is that Black women are economic ecosystems. Mm-hmm. So what this means is that if you take income from one Black woman, you're not taking it from an individual. You're taking it from a bunch of people who rely on her. And we see this reflected in the data where Black women spend more time caregiving than their white counterparts, right? So the entire caregiving industry, which is both in professional sense, like nurses and your home health aides, but also the unpaid labor that's taking place, all of it is resting on Black women, women of color, and by extension, women in general. And so I think ultimately, when we talk about solutions, really the policy litmus test is, does it satisfy Black women best? And if it doesn't, then we need to go back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Sonia Dan-Pat. I am the senior managing partner at Oak Lane, which is an advisory consulting company. Prior to this, I was with Boston Public Schools with the city of Boston. I spent about 3 years there, and I've had a whole host of jobs as a transplant. Y'all gonna hear my country twang. Just love me. And I've done work. I'm a doula as well. And I've done work, everything from pregnant persons to tenured professors, visas, HR, recruitment, retention, everything I needed to do. I've done for years. And mostly centered around community engagement and education. Okay. I left my job working for Boston Public Schools. And I needed to focus inwardly on my own, but you asked for solutions, and I want to name that there's a space where, Black women are carrying things on their backs. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would like to talk about, some practicals and fundamentals, even in the workplace, that could mitigate this just a little, right? And it was so loud to me as the director of recruitment, right? And working in some of the retention space, being very strategic, looking at data on who you hire and representing, right? Especially here in the city, it is so diverse. There's so many languages and people, right? And I was so excited to kind of come into that space. And I saw so many like ebb and flows, right? We're going into the retention space and coming back to recruitment and trying to elevate, but consistently, there was a lot of spaces where I, as a Black woman leading this space, right? Trying to hire and kind of hold the door for other people and but I ended up being like a sounding board, right? That it was not in my job description, yet it occupied so much of my time, and not a 9 to 5. I mean, I had to give flexibility 8 o'clock in the evening, right? These things just to help and support and to talk people off. What do you do within these systems that can be toxic, or that, things are falling on deaf ears, right? Like, or you're sitting in some of these spaces, like, how do you support? And so even down to the small things of when people come into positions, now this is the human resources talking, right? People know if they are going to stay at a job within the first 6 months. 6 months. That's it. If we don't prepare for people, right? How do we help them? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, right? Hearing their stories. What's your why? Okay. And so you mentioned the federal jobs, right? The city jobs for a lot of that. And I know that there's a massive need, but there are so many people that are like holding these spaces, and it's skipped over. They're going into places where the foundation has cracks. Okay. We never stood a chance. The clock is ticking from the moment that you get there. And so where do we come in and supporting in these spaces to support? Right. And so people have such a thirst to be heard, for people to answer calls or to help them strategize in what to do. And I was grateful to be able to do that for my 3 years. Right. And really took it seriously. And, I was honored to be able to sit in that space until I had to put me first. I had to put me first. Okay. Had my first baby. Right. So very excited. Thank you. Thank you. But in all of these spaces, having plans for people who come in, right? Looking at what's around them. If people see themselves in the workforce, then they're more likely to stay. If they get a say in what they're doing and contribute their thoughts and ideas into it, they're more likely to stay, right? But what are you going to do once you're there, right? Black women especially, are feeling spaces that there's nowhere to grow, right? And also, multiple people have left some of those positions, and that by the time they interview folks to get into those positions, a Black man will take it, and they're looking for folks and relying on the systemic issues, because they're thinking, I bet they won't leave. Because what'd you say? The ecosystems? Get into it, right? Because who's caring for families sending money back home? Who's translating all outside of their scope of work, right? Who's desperate? And we're guessing and hoping and betting like, oh, they're fine until they break. And the moment that you leave, and here I am now, okay, I'm about 9 months into my time pivoting, and I'm having to deal with health stuff, right? When you soften a bit, then what happens? Okay, to piece yourself back together, but where were those guards, right? To support and to kind of give into those things. And so even back in those spaces, if we have plans for people, and I tried my best to lead in that space. Why are you here? What do you want to do? What are your goals? Do you want to, you need to help and support your family? Let's get you more opportunities, stipends, right? Consulting gigs to build you up so that you can do what you want to do. You want to get your degree? Let me make sure that you're in spaces where people who can give that, and let's have some conversations, right? To be a little bit of a hodor, okay? And you are coming into, plan for people, but my staff stayed with me those 3 years. And that's a big deal. Until I quit, I left, I had to resign, right? And even then, and then eventually my entire team was dissolved, right? So it's a tough space to kind of sit in. I also went back to school because that's what Black women do with a newborn, right? When nothing else makes sense and people tell you you're not good enough, you go back to the work, right? But even in the midst of that, the whitewashing of programs, that it's almost illegal. It feels that way, and the pressure to even talk about yourself and your people and the languages, and the hush hush, and it's tough, but how do we even look at things at a practical and fundamental level? So,
Sorry. I just have to add my 2 cents. First of all, let's clap, please. Thank you so much. So what my dissertation focuses on is exactly what you just talked about, so we should talk. Afterwards, we talk. The data backs up everything she just said, right? So Black women are the least likely to be promoted, the most likely to turn over, and we are labeled as low performers for those reasons. And this is in predominantly white environments. This is work by Elizabeth Linos and co-authors. What's interesting about that is what they looked at is sort of, who really drives those outcomes. I think people immediately think, oh, probably white men. Sure, on both ends, but white women as well. Okay? We're getting a little interesting, right? What I'll say here is that I actually was not surprised by the reneging of DEI. It's like the least surprising thing. So I co-founded an organization called the Sadie Collective. It's bringing more Black women and minorities into economics related fields, very similar to what you were talking about, these pipeline pathway programs. And I remember when sort of the summer of 2020 hit, and I told my team, I said, we have about a year to get as much money as possible, because this is about to expire. And they were like, are you sure, Anna? I'm like, yes. Okay. There's a timestamp. And so I think that, what I kind of discovered both in the work that I've been doing, but also in the advocacy that I've been participating in, and just being a Black woman and talking to Black women, is that I'm over sort of expecting people to be benevolent eventually. What I mean by that is, there's a lot of bigots in their bathtubs, and they like to come outside and like to be bigots as well. And what I've learned is that accountability is really the only way you ensure that bigotry does not spread beyond their doorstep. And so I think that, with policy makers in the room, but also folks who are sort of on the ground, I think that we need to start focusing on accountability mechanisms, to disincentivize people from discrimination, right? You were talking about the hiring space. I'd like to remind people that hiring discrimination is illegal, okay? Despite the fact that there is 300 plus articles that show that it happens regardless of how you cut the data. And so I do think that like partnering with, HR folks and getting a sense of, do you actually want to stop discrimination, or are we just sort of talking? Right. I think also, government stepping in and saying, okay, how do we ensure that the entrepreneurs that are usually going to be hiring Black folks, we know that Black hiring managers tend to hire Black people, right? And that Black owned businesses have had a huge spike in employee growth. I think it's like 33%, that, we're actually equipping those businesses with what they need, right? So I think if we look at the facts and steep ourselves in the reality, a lot of times Black people know how to support Black people. Yep. And so if you're a government or, an organization that's really interested in making sure that Black progress is inevitable, and it has to be, by the way, right? Because diversity is inevitable. 1 in 4 Gen Z is Hispanic. This country is becoming increasingly non-white, and 1 in 4 people in the world in 2050 are going to be of African descent. Somehow the society is going to have to figure out how to deal with Black people in a way that's not extractive, right? Because we're about to be a good chunk of the world's population. So I think that if that's your goal, then you should be working alongside Black people to design accountability mechanisms that disincentivize harm towards Black people. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yes, absolutely.
I want to also kind of talk about like the retention space of this. I think sometimes systems are, if there is retention. Correct. Right. It's not always, right? But really targeting some of the systemic issues that are out there, right? To kind of help people instead of, I think in a lot of our spaces, and it was like, okay, education, going back to school, which has not really ever been an issue, especially here in Massachusetts. Okay. But, right. Making sure that there are financial literacy courses, right? Making sure that there are avenues on how to feed families and kind of like branch out to those things. Like really, I'm getting ready to kind of launch a series with Boston Public Libraries, like free series to kind of just push out like, what do we need? Right. So that something still can be done even on my own, right? And reaching out to some of the change makers for this, but sitting in some of these spaces, I think about that. Like, can we grow and evolve with where we are currently? Things have changed so much since COVID, right? And even coming into the spaces now, what are the needs, right? Instead of weaponizing them, right? And sitting in that racial battle fatigue because people are burnt out, but how are they still getting this information and having a series and then collaborating for things, having a live calendar, right? So that things can be found in a central space and it can be reliable, not kind of like die off when people leave and move on or are laid off or whatever. But how do we continue to grow and perpetuate these things? But a lot of this information is lost as a transplant. Okay. I have seen this place has so many resources. It's amazing. It's so amazing. And I've spent my time. How can I help? Or did you know about this? And just connecting people and trying to be a trusted source, right? But even within all of those spaces, people don't know what they don't know, or they are suspicious, right? And can they trust the things when you go out? Like, right? Like, I have to put Black and brown people in front of these spaces because that's the only way I'm going to get you even to the library so that you don't feel like you're being set up and ICE is going to come get you, right? Like, I have to think about those things with students or even kind of going anywhere. And so I just want to kind of name that making sure that if we have retention, really targeting some of the issues and being a sounding board and hosting office hours, right? In addition to the coffee chats and really hearing from the people and just being consistent with that, I think it would just go such a long way, kind of going back to those practical, fundamental things. So, yeah.
I thank everyone for lending your expertise, for your transparency. We have about 5 or 7 minutes left. I do want to be thoughtful about equality of voice. So if there are people that have not spoken that want to offer some final thoughts and contribute to the table, we would love to hear from that. And similarly, I'll ask our council president, Rusi Lujan, if there is a closing statement that you might like to offer. No pressure, but with respect. Okay. And Counselor, do you want to come? Okay, all right, okay. Yeah. Alexandria or who? Oh, yes, yeah, okay.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So my name is Dr. April Khadija Ennis. I'm a native lifelong Bostonian. I was laid off this past May. And I'll say that even with credentials, you know, with an MD, with a master's in health services research, it is incredibly hard to get a job. I was working for a research firm that's based down in Virginia, and they relied heavily on a lot of federal contracts that dealt with equity, particularly health equity. And as those got cut, we kind of, you know, figured that the axe was going to fall. And, you know, in particular, one project I was very passionate about explored the experiences of Black families who are participating in home visiting programs across the country. Cut. That's gone. So when I lost my job, and to touch on some of the things that were already said here, it took 10 weeks for unemployment to come in. So in the meantime, I was trying to lean into it's a real thing. Yes. And, you know, in that time, I was trying to lean into my side hustle, as we heard a little bit about here. But the issue is that there's so many of us in those same pools competing for those same grants that it feels virtually impossible. So now that I'm back on the job trail, we're talking 250 applications put in, one interview. So one question that I have in terms of solutions, we all know that it's not legal for companies to engage in racist hiring practices when the decision is happening on a human level. But my sense is that AI is playing a significant role in discrimination through these algorithms, because some of the responses I've gotten from prospective employers have been almost instantaneous. So my question is, what's going on? And as someone who's, you know, been in this city for generations, you know, I think about my great grandmother who owned a laundry service on Sterling Street in Roxbury, which is now, I think, in the area of Melnea Cass Boulevard. She owned 2 homes. I look at my life and I think, how is it that I have even less opportunity than she did in 1926? And then another thing that I'll just quickly touch on is, again, that 7.5% number. I'm a numbers girl. Okay. So my issue is there's so much more that's in terms of nuance and context that's both underneath and around that number, and the impact that this, employment instability is playing a role in Black women's lives. I'm a newly diagnosed hypertensive right now. So I'm so grateful to be part of this conversation, and thank you, Congresswoman Pressley, for fighting for us. Your leadership is authentic. It is real. So grateful for you, and to YW also.
I just, you know, say, when you said, how is it? We have failed. I mean, you know, government and systems have failed, because it is the aspiration of everyone for the next generation, for your children to do better than you. And that is not happening. I'm on the Financial Services Committee. You know, Black home ownership is the lowest it's been in 6 decades. You know, it used to be, I think the range for a first-time homeowner might have been like 29 to 32. Mm-hmm. And now it is in the early to mid 40s, mm-hmm. You know. You know, we have a lot to do to undo this harm. On the AI point, thank you for naming that, because I also want to speak about those implications. You know, we want to get the benefits and harness all it can mean in terms of saving lives and healthcare, but the future of work implications are very real, and will have a disparate impact on Black women. I think 21% of the jobs that are held by Black women are the most vulnerable to being replaced by AI. But what you're naming is an algorithm bias in terms of hiring. That was not something that I had looked at, but I am going to do that because in my role in financial services, what I've been focused on is algorithm biases when it comes to lending. Because what will you do when there's no explainability? And once the algorithm has decided you will not get that, you know, small business loan, you will not get that mortgage, but I don't have a person that I can hold accountable or a pattern to point to them. So that's where my focus has been. So you've given me something new. I know before we turn to Alexandria, the secretary did want to say something on unemployment benefits. That is very real, and I am grateful that was made, because that is something that we can work on. And I know in my office, my district office in Dorchester, we receive a lot of calls on that front. So the secretary wanted to offer something on the expediting and the long wait list for UE.
So as secretary, I oversee the Department of Unemployment Assistance. I know a couple examples were lifted up here and the longer wait times that you've experienced. I hear you, I see you, and it's something that is very much a priority. I want to be able to respond to every single person that I get emails from to apologize if there's a wait, but we're working judiciously to expedite ensuring that any eligible claimant is able to receive the funding. I think just to be able to capture kind of how we got here, that's no excuse, but I think DUA has traditionally had its ups and downs. This past summer, we did receive a 5% federal cut, which other states across the country we're also navigating. And obviously that impacts our staffing, it impacts being able to answer the calls in a timely fashion. Good news is, looking forward, we are getting ahead of the seasonal upticks that we typically see. We're hiring up, literally trying to recruit as well as onboard new adjudicators, which was the number one reason why people were calling, to try to get their claims processed because of waiting for an employer, ID verification, other things that we have to make sure we do as part of the insurance process. But then also making sure that we're staffing up for the seasonal uptick that we know happens every single year with seasonality. And I think similarly, recognizing if there's more headwinds to come with our economic downturn, we want to make sure that we have increased staffing. We know that it's a problem, but we're also top priority making sure that we can be more responsive. I think that at the end of the day, there is a process. We can't just blanket and give. We have to obviously go through every single case one by one. It shouldn't take calling a congresswoman or a secretary to be able to get their claim heard. But that is exactly why we want to make sure we can be as responsive as possible for anybody that has an issue, and that obviously they need to be eligible to receive claims. I want you to know that it's a priority, and certainly want you to take very seriously.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for raising that, because that is
Yes, and thank you.
Okay, I'm Thank you so much.
Can I just say one sentence? Because Nicole will kill me if I don't mention this. Nicole Obi is my boss. She will kill me if I don't say. I'll say two sentences. The community CDFIs, community development financial institutions, they're under attack, and if they often give funding to small businesses, Black-owned businesses, Black women businesses. The CDFI fund, I believe, has been closed or shuttered in DC. And so if we think about what's happening, we just need funding here in Massachusetts at a state level and at a federal level to CDFIs to ensure that our businesses owned by people of color are getting dollars, because they're often some of the only folks to give out those resources. I'm so sorry.
Services, and so that is an issue. We just had a hearing on CDFI and MPIs as well.
Thank you.
But my colleagues across the aisle do not see the value, and we pushed hard to get them to also understand the benefit of CDFIs for rural communities.
Yeah, right.
You know, to really understand. So, and this is in the context of the bank collapse and everything. I don't want to get too.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, but thank you for raising that. Okay.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. Thank all of you. You all inspire me. Thank you for your stories. I'm here as the lead clinician of the Ascend Partial Hospitalization Program at HRI Hospital. It is the only partial hospitalization program in the state of Massachusetts specifically designed for Black, Indigenous, and women of color. And so all these stories, I hear them all for my patients. It's predominantly Black women that I serve, and just the burden. I've been at HRI Hospital. I've been there for about 3.5 years by now, and this program has been running for 4 years. So as the longest running lead clinician, period, and lead clinician of the Ascend program, I know I'm the sole person that knows and carries the weight of these Black women at the hospital. And so it's been years and years of advocacy. And I'm going to shoot my shot. Congresswoman, can you please visit HRI Hospital, specifically the Ascend program? I told my patients today I was coming to see you, and I asked them for our question of the day. I was like, what would you tell Congresswoman Pressley about what keeps you safe here? Because again, these are women who come here to my program, who are experiencing racism, discrimination, all that in the workplace, and they have no hope, no support, but they give each other hope. We have conversations like this. And so the healing is in this community. And I want to make sure that we are having solutions for mental health. What are we doing about the Black women who are losing their jobs? How are we caring for them holistically? So I'm so thankful for all of you. Thank you for the opportunity. I do want more conversations because again, I do everything for my Ascend patients, for my Black and brown women, but the Black women, shout out to y'all. Thank you for your stories. You inspire me. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
For not naming CDFIs. I'm so glad you shot your shot. Yeah. Make a commitment. Okay.
Thank you so
much. So I'm gonna, Council President Lujan, do you have something that you would like to raise as we transition, and then Abba will close us out.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Professor, because you always lead with heart. I lost my voice this weekend alongside my senator, who is here, Senator Liz Miranda. She was here and she had to leave, but also brings greetings. You know, we as two Black women who grew up in this city, we do this work as Congresswoman does from our heart. This is about our people and about our communities. So I feel like right now I was just at church, in a living room, in therapy, in school, all at the same time, in only the way that Black women can do. I'll just share that the one thing that I always wish that we would do more or do a better job of is reframing what I think a lot of people see diversity, equity, and inclusion work as work of charity, when it is really the work of justice. And I also really believe that what would it look like, something that the other side is really good at, is short reframings of issues that make it sound simple and easy and digestible. But I think that we have to do a better job of making people know that that diversity, equity, and inclusion work is really the work of normalization. How do we normalize these boardrooms, these industries, these hospitals to look like our country, to look like our city? Because anything other than that is abnormal. The idea that leadership looks like white men is abnormal. That diversity is normalization. And I think we have to do a better job of framing that. Any room where the only people, or if you have a panel that's only men speaking, or if anything like that, that is not normal. And our goal should be what is normal. And normalizing Black women, normalizing anyone who's been otherized or vulnerable is the work. And so I just try to bring that into all spaces, because they will make us feel like we're the crazy ones, especially in this moment. And we have to continue to reassert that we are the normal ones and they are the crazy ones. And that is because any space that does not look like our country and like our cities is not normal and not the city or country that we're trying to build. So just, I wanted to add that.
Thank you for representing yourself and also Senator Miranda. So we thank her for her leadership and her solidarity. And now we will close it out since we are at YW's house. And we'll hear from our indefatigable leader, Abba, to close us out.
Thank you so much. Ruthie, I was going to say that I ain't been to church in a long time, but this felt like church. This was amazing. And I had chills the whole time folks were talking, and I just feel so honored that we could make the space for these conversations. And as I talked to Congresswoman about, it's all about action. So it's not just about having this one conversation today, but how can we move this work forward and normalize what is absolutely unnormal right now. Me being who I am, I'm going to close us out with a quick poem, if you don't mind. Because as you were speaking, it just came to me, and many folks may know who Lucille Clifton is. But when we talk about all the trauma in this room, I also want to lift up how powerful this room is and everybody in this room, right? So I'm going to share a very brief poem by Lucille Clifton. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight, my other hand. come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. So we're going to keep keeping on. We're going to keep keeping on because that's what we do. And we're going to take care of ourselves along the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.